Here we go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is ODD. Welcome to the second ODDcast. Today I have Devin Madgy with me of Flat Earth Paradise. And if you guys are tuning in, I want you to let me know if my audio's okay. I've been working on fixing my audio. I hope I don't sound like Isaac Hayes or Barry White like I did last time. But let me know in the chat if my voice is okay, please, and we will continue on. But anyway, we got Devin Madgy. He's pretty much, in my eyes, an expert on the ancient mythos of what's going on in the North Pole, as far as Shambhala, Eden, Hyperborea, Agartha, and sometimes even Mount Olympus. He does a lot of great work, and I really respect his work. I love it so much so that I'm very excited to have him on the show today. So what's up, brother? How you doing? Introduce yourself and let us know what your channel's all about, what your mission is all about.
Well, thank you, ODD. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Devin Madgy, and like you said, I run the Flat Earth Paradise channel. And the name itself, Flat Earth Paradise, it describes exactly what my message is. I strongly suggest with my research that there is not only hidden land at the North Pole, what we know as the center of our flat plane, but that this land has been described over and over again in stories, ancient maps. Practically all ancient cosmologies speak of this land. So the center is essentially a paradise. It's the same one known to the Asians as Shambhala, to the Greeks as Hyperborea, to the Hindus as Paradisha or Area Varsha. The Japanese know it as Island of the Congealed Drop, and to the Christians, we know it as the Garden of Eden. So the North Pole is the origin of magnetism, and it's what William Warren in Paradise Found has called the cradle of humanity. Now, this land is home to an assembly of semi-physical, semi-ethereal beings, and they are what we would consider pure of heart. So those in Eden and those who are able to go there possess an affinity for enlightenment. And this is what all of the stories suggest. And yeah, it sounds like a fairy tale land, but that is what I'm suggesting, that this is a sacred land and that this is the greatest secret ever kept. And it's been staring us in the face the entire time. The North Pole is home to the Garden of Eden.
Absolutely. I think so as well. And when I say mythos, I don't say it in a way that it's fake in any way, but it's almost like syncretism, where every single continent, every single culture had the same idea about what the North Pole is in their own way, even though they had no communications with each other. Now, what I was going to say to the audience, I have on screen, I have all sorts of maps running in a slideshow with North Pole as it was in mostly the 1500s and 1600s. Now, let me ask you, Devin, what do you notice about when the North Pole disappeared from maps?
Right. So these maps come from the 1400s to the early 1600s. There's a few from the mid 1600s, but after this time is when all of a sudden maps had blank spots at the North Pole. And essentially this, what is usually a 4-continent system with a large rock at the center, this area was practically deleted from all maps. And there's even evidence that parts of Canada and Greenland were also removed, which sort of suggests an old world type of Photoshop. Now, this time period, the mid 1600s, is when the globe model started to be pushed in the West. And this is when we had the Copernican theory really make its way to the science books and in academia. So who knows? We can only speculate, but it's very interesting that the Garden of Eden vanished at the same time period that the globe model was being pushed.
Yeah, I agree. And for the audience, again, all these maps that are going across the screen, there is a link in the description for a zip file for you guys to download them and study them for yourselves. What's interesting is that most of the maps are from different cartographers, different map makers. There's a couple from Mercator, but there's also ones from different guys. So I find it very interesting. And Devin's absolutely right. Out of nowhere, the North Pole, as it was, disappeared, and you can see even the surrounding lands, like the northern Canada and stuff like that. You see that it's kind of faded away, like they accidentally erased a little bit of that as well when they were getting rid of these sacred lands at the North Pole. So let me ask you about your you have a, what do we call it? A group called the North Seal Project. What is that all about? What are you working towards with that?
Yes. So the North Seal Project is the name for the mission that myself and 3 others are embarking on next July of 2018. We've been researching the center for the past year. I've been publishing my presentations, and it got to the point where everything seemed meaningless unless I actually took action. I was adhering to the feminine principles of creativity, wonder, communication, but not the masculine principle of action, of execution. So we decided to form a team 2 months ago, and ever since, our daily focus has been to effectively orchestrate an initial trip to the North Pole. So the goal of the North Seal Project is to document our preparations and therefore inspire others to take this same journey. There's a lot of people who are feeling drawn to the center just like us. And it's this strange metaphysical pull. We feel it deep within our hearts. It's a sense of duty and mission that is indescribable. But like anything, nobody wants to be the first one to take such a drastic and possibly dangerous journey. Somebody has to stand up and say, enough talk. We know what might be at the North Pole, so I'm taking this journey, and I will show that it's possible with the correct intent and planning.
Sure.
So beginning next month, we will be coming out with vlogs and regular updates detailing our preparations, our spiritual and physical practices, and the main goal is to show that this can be done. We are currently stationed on the west coast of Wales in the UK. It's very possible that we will be in Greenland by the time we depart. So our plans have changed. We came out with a crowdfunder video 2 months ago. Our goal was $100,000 in order to rent an Arctic charter plane with live streaming capabilities. We ended up making 5% of that number. But this has actually proved to be a blessing. Our main concern with the plane from day one was, well, what's going to happen to the fuel and with the emissions from the plane? Because if this is truly a sacred, pure land, we want to respect this place. We want to respect its inhabitants as much as possible. So any potential pollution coming from aircraft didn't sit well with us. So now that we don't even have the means for an aircraft, our plans have changed, but for the better. We are now in the process of purchasing a mid-sized sailboat in order to go in the same way that Olaf Jansen in The Smoky God went. So I don't want to give too much away because our first updates will be next month at the end of October, and that's when everyone will finally meet the team. And from there, week by week, we will be going step by step, detailing what we're purchasing, and everything in between.
Awesome. This brings me to something that I find interesting. I read the book Zetetic Astronomy. Have you ever read Zetetic Astronomy or browsed through it a little bit?
I've browsed through it, yes.
Okay, in chapter 13, I just want to run this by you. It's chapter 13. I'm just going to read this, and I'm going to put it on screen for the viewers, and then after I'm done reading it, it's not too much. We'll talk about it. It says, Chapter 13, The Earth's True Position in the Universe, Comparatively Recent Information, Present Chemical Condition, and Approaching Destruction by Fire. It has been demonstrated that the Earth is a plane, the surface center of which is immediately underneath the star called Polaris, and the extremities of which are bound by vast region of ice and water and irregular masses of land which bear evidence of plutonic or fiery action and origin. In the geological structure of extreme northern regions, the sedimentary strata are abundant and of vast extent, while the constitution of Antarctic strata seems on the contrary, as far as yet examined, entirely igneous. Anyway, let me keep going. It gets a little crazy here. Basically, what I'm about to read is an account of the author Samuel Rowbotham referring to another book about a guy's expedition to the North Pole. And what was written in that book says, the waves rise like mountains in height. Ships are heaved up to the clouds and apparently precipitated by circling whirlpools to the bed of the ocean. The winds are piercing cold and so boisterous that the pilot's voice can seldom be heard, whilst a dismal and almost continual darkness adds greatly to the danger, the sea quickly rising to a fearful height, breaking over the loftiest bergs. Our ships were involved in an ocean of rolling fragments of ice, hard as floating rocks of granite, which were dashed against them by the waves with so much violence that their masts quivered as if they would fall at every successive blow. The rudders were destroyed and nearly torn away from the stern posts. Hours passed after hours without the least mitigation of the awful circumstances in which we were placed. The loud crashing noise of the straining and working of the timbers and decks as she was driven against some of the heavier pieces was sufficient to fill the stoutest heart with dismay. It continues on, and I got this whole thing on screen right now for people to check out. But this is the third edition of Earth Not a Globe, Zetetic Astronomy by Samuel L. Rowbotham, a.k.a. Parallax. And it just continues on with how this is just the most dangerous expedition that this guy's ever been on. And I wanted to ask you if you think this is possibly true. And if it is, God bless you. I hope you're okay and safe when you try to do this. But also, could it be that they're trying to keep us away from going there by telling us that it's such a dangerous place?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because there's many accounts which parallel the one you just described, that it's a perilous journey. There's even Greek accounts of sea monsters just infesting the Arctic waters. And obviously, you read these and a journey to the North Pole seems quite disastrous. We have multiple accounts, maybe less, but nonetheless. Olaf Jansen, we have one of a ship from the early 1900s called the Mount Wollaston. And we also have Admiral Byrd, who is not in a ship, but in a plane. Now, Olaf and the Mount Wollaston's stories are very smooth sailing. So, indeed, perhaps that is just put in the public sphere to scare anybody who wants to undertake this, to scare them off. But honestly, there has not been a modern expedition done in the past 120 years by boat. So I have no expectations. Me and the entire SEAL project are willing to risk our lives. This is how passionate we are about the North. And it's interesting because North is an anagram for throne. So according to us, we are going to the throne of the world, to the Axis Mundi. Now, you mentioned the North Star Polaris. So the axis, if you look up the definition, it's an area in which everything revolves around. So whether it's an axis in a mechanical sense, or in this case, in an earthly sense. So the North Star is stagnant. It remains in place year after year in the same spot. And the constellations revolve around it. Now, this is because at the North Pole is what mythology terms as Axis Mundi. Now, the Axis Mundi is the sort of duct tape that bridges Earth and heaven. And literally every culture in the world has one of them. It's either a sacred mountain, a sacred pillar, or a tree of life that stands at the center of cosmology. Now, if we buy that the Earth is a globe, well, this just sounds ridiculous, and it's very easy to reduce these as completely made up. But when we take into account our own flat realm and where the toroidal field comes from, where all magnetism comes from, which is the center, then it makes sense. The center is the origin point. It's where the material rises to meet with the celestial. So it's very paradoxical, but the North Pole is on Earth, and it is also existing at a different frequency, and therefore in a higher realm. So the Axis Mundi, we have, like you said at the beginning, Mount Olympus for the Greeks. The Japanese call it Mount Shumasen. The Muslims call it Mount High Hera. The Norsemen have Yggdrasil. The Germans have Irminsul. I mean, there's hundreds of world axes all around the world.
Sure. What's up with it's called Rupus Negra or something, the black rock, magnetic rock at the North Pole. In some of the stuff I watched from you, there's basically a hole in the center. How does the magnetic rock work its way in there? Is it still in the center and there's kind of a hole surrounding it, or is it in that hole, or what's it to you?
So our model is what we call the crater continent at the center. Mm-hmm. So at the center, like we've shown, there is a massive crater in which one needs to descend into in order to enter this new realm. Once you are in this crater, you are then existing near the four continents system, which are the four island continents in Asian mythology which surround Mount Meru. And like we were saying earlier, there were indeed four circular continents with a large rock or mountain in medieval maps. Now, Gerard Mercator was a Flemish cartographer, and he made the world's first specific map of the North Pole. In 1595 and subsequently in 1606, he came out with a series of maps depicting these four circular island continents in detail. And they are divided by four rivers, which empty into what he calls an indrawing sea, or a whirlpool, which at the center is located the Rupes Nigra, which in his map he calls the Rupes Nigra et Altissima, which means the black and very high rock. Now, if that is not a startling connection between Asian cosmology, four continents with Mount Meru at the center, and Mercator's depiction with four continents and the Rupes Nigra at the center, then I don't know what else we can say about it. It's staring us in the face, and to me, it's completely proof that this is the layout. Now, in older videos, I have ambiguously stated Mount Meru is near this hole, and I will be the first to admit I was wrong. It wasn't very clear at first where Mount Meru was. Now, let's say my project is able to get to the North Pole. Well, we're aiming to go to the southern continent of this four-continent system, which the ancients called Jambudvipa. And if we look at the Mercator map, this is the closest continent to Greenland. And in fact, there is perhaps a connecting land bridge, or if it's not a land bridge, it's a thin canal going from North Greenland to this continent. So this is where we're trying to get to. Now, once we're here, we possibly will see Mount Meru in the distance. Mount Meru is hundreds of thousands of miles tall, according to the mythology. This seems very unreasonable, but if we stop looking at it from a materialist reductionist viewpoint, Mount Meru at some point loses its physicality and becomes ethereal. So the short answer to your question is we will be nowhere near Mount Meru if we happen to make it to one of the four continents.
Sure.
But we will indeed be in the crater.
I see. Okay, so on this North Pole, on a lot of these maps and in a lot of the ancient depictions of the North Arctic area, it's surrounded by basically a mountain range or a series of mountain ranges. I'm not too sure if I've ever really seen them, like even images of this. Is this a fact that you can see these mountain ranges from certain continents, like Greenland or the northern Canada?
No. And again, we can only speculate. We have no pictures. Nobody has been there to tell us. But like you said, Mercator drew a 14-mile wide mountain range on the perimeter of these four continents. And it's interesting because in the myths of Shambhala, and even in the artwork, Shambhala is surrounded by snow-covered mountains. And in the same way that the ice wall surrounds these outer lands as we know it, and that is perhaps a border from this realm to what people would call lands beyond the ice wall, there is also an ice wall or ice mountain wall at the center.
Right.
Now, it's very interesting because the closer you get to the center, the more divine the beings are, and the larger things get. And this is indeed why in all of the stories of Agartha, of Shambhala, of Avalon, the beings are giants, and the trees are magnificently tall, and the fruit is giant. The apples are the size of a car. That sort of thing. Now, if we look at the ancient map of Bhumandala, which is the Vedic cosmology of the universe, we see Mount Meru at the center, and we see many, many rings forming around it, which extend to the borders of the universe. Now, again, this is just speculation, but it's very possible that each of the rings signifies a different realm, and each realm is protected by an ice wall. And to make the transition into each realm, we must find openings into each of the ice walls. And as Mercator pointed out in his map, there are 14 openings where you're able to bypass this outer mountain range and just go straight into one of these four rivers.
Right. And stuff I've been reading and finding on these maps, even Mercator himself was claiming that certain races of people, or even certain types of people like pygmies, like tribal women live on one of the continents and stuff like that. I thought that was very interesting. It was noted like it was a fact almost. Have you actually the Big Think? I don't know if you guys. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard of the Big Think being flat earthers. Bill Nye goes on it all the time and tells us, he puts propaganda on the Big Think, but the Big Think has a web article about the land of the pygmies and the giant magnets. I'll probably post that link in the description later. But let me play a couple things for the audience real quick. One thing I wanted to say is when I watched I like the movie The Neverending Story a whole lot, and it has the ivory tower, but it never really connects it to like a center of the earth or the world thing. But I find it quite easy to connect to Mount Meru and all that stuff. I have a poster behind me of The Neverending Story, so I'm looking at it. But I got a couple movie clips that I want to play for the audience, and then after I play each one, I only have two. I'll explain to you what exactly we just watched, because unfortunately, my guests can't see what I'm showing. So let me pull these up real quick. The first one we're going to watch comes from Wonder Woman, the new movie. Let me pull this up. Once it shows up, I'll play it. There we go. All right, this is for the audience. Check this out. In this Wonder Woman scene, it shows these army guys going. They're just traveling through the sea. It's dark and foggy, and then out of nowhere, they bust through an invisible portal that leads to a hidden land. I'm just gonna play it real quick. It's 27 seconds. Here we go.
There! Go forward! Was habt ihr gefunden? Seht euch das an! Was habt ihr denn da? Habt ihr das auch? There he is! The pilot! I can see him! He's there! The pilot!
Okay, so I just played that scene. The guys poke his head. All this one moment he's in the dark fogginess and looking at the ocean. Next minute he pokes his head through and it's all beautiful. It's light. It looks like a paradise. And there's this beautiful land. And what I find interesting is that it's the Amazons, right? The women. It's nothing but women that live and inhabit this island. And that's what Mercator was saying, that there's this tribe of women called the Pygmies that live on one of these, maybe all the continents or one of those four continents up north. And real quick, let me show one more clip. This is from Kong Skull Island, and what we're gonna see on this scene, I put two clips together. One of them's from early on in the movie, and then it skips to later on in the movie. But first, it shows these guys planning to go to a land that no one's ever been to because it's hidden by a perpetual storm, and this storm it just never lets up, and it surrounds this hidden island. And then it cuts immediately to a scene that I found where they're all hanging out, and it's the Aurora Borealis surrounding everybody that's hanging out there. So this one is 38 seconds. Let me play this one real quick, and we'll get back to talking about this stuff.
Our expedition takes us to a place every nautical trade route known to man has avoided for centuries. As our satellites show, the island is surrounded by a perpetual storm system, allowing it to remain hidden from the outside world. But with Colonel Packard's helicopter transport, we will be the first to break through to the other side.
Okay, this part's silent, but it's showing everybody who they traveled through the storm using a helicopter, and now they're on the island, and the island has the Aurora Borealis there. Now, nowhere in the movie does it say or even show that they're going to
our expedition takes us to a place
to the North Pole. but it's obvious that's where the Aurora Borealis is. So I thought that was interesting. Have you seen those movies, Devin?
I have not. No, I just got to see Logan, which flat out says in the North there is a land called Eden.
Oh, yeah.
And the comic book in it says Eden or End. And it's very interesting because Eden is an anagram for end. And for those like myself who just feel magnetically compelled to go here, we do view this as a sort of end of the game of the energy extraction matrix, which exists in these outer lands. It's a inorganic system that has been set up, and at the center, it's not a fairy tale land. It's not something of dreams. It simply does not have this artificial system in place. Government, banks,
Yeah.
all of the regulations we see out here. Now, it's interesting that Hyperborea, which is the ancient land beyond the north wind, it's in the name that it is the land beyond beyond Borea, which is the Borealis.
Right. Yeah. That's you saying north equals throne. And when you said that, one thing that I wanted to point out was every time I look at the word southern or south, it has the word out in it, or southern has the word outer. And so they do put all words have the etymological clues there that you can kind of see what's going on, because, of course, the south is the outer rim. And so southern has the word outer right in it. And what I think they've done with us, is direct our attention to the skies and say that's outer space, when in fact outer space is actually sideways in any direction, towards the south, of course, you know what I mean? So it's interesting that these words, I could never figure out what north was. I always just was thinking it came directly from Norse. And of course, Norse mythology has the
tree of life.
Agartha, yeah.
Yes. It's all of these measures are taken to try to hide the center from us. And they try to confuse us with these three North Poles. If you look on Wikipedia or any scientist who follows the mainstream narrative, they will tell you there are three North Poles. There is a geographic North Pole, there is a magnetic North Pole, and there is a geomagnetic North Pole. Now, I have looked into these extensively. They say every year or so, the magnetic North Pole changes position. And so it moves a few miles west some years, it moves 40 miles east another, and I can assure you it's all bullshit. It's meant to keep us in these perpetual chains, so we cannot truly understand that the true magnetic north is at the center, which all compasses are pointing to. It's that simple. We don't need any scientific jargon to be able to understand this.
Sure. And you are of the opinion that we don't really need to focus on the southern rim. We should more or less, check out the North Pole first and foremost, right?
Exactly. The southern ice wall is absolutely 100% a red herring. And this is why we see many prominent flat earthers, who I would call shills, who are spending so much effort focusing on the ice wall and the Antarctic Treaty. And why are so many countries protecting it? It seems reasonable until you realize one does not protect an area that they do not have domain over. Now, if we look at the 9 worlds of Norse mythology, there are other lands outside of Midgard. At the center of Midgard is Yggdrasil, and you have a Bifrost Bridge, a rainbow bridge to Asgard, which is home of the gods. Now, this rainbow bridge is not literal, it's a metaphor. It's the same thing as the flaming sword in the Christian tale of the Garden of Eden. And this means there's a spiritual protective barrier around Eden. If one is not of pure intention, one cannot enter this land. But the further away you get from the center, the less magnetism it is. The further you get away from the aurora borealis, the for lack of a better term, the more hellish the lands get. So indeed, there are many, many lands beyond the ice wall, but these are hellish realms. And even in the 9 worlds of Norse mythology, these are the lands of fire and the lands of ice. And humans do not live here. These are non-human entities. And there's actually a early 1900s account that was published in the magazine The Atlantic called The Iron Republic. And it's about an heir who receives a lot of money after his uncle dies. He is fed up with modern society and its ways, so he decides to gather up all of his gold, gather a crew, and he sets sail on the open sea. And he ends up going into one of the openings in the ice wall. And what he finds is an entire magnificent city, and it's very advanced in technology, but it is not a supreme paradise. There are not many forests. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and it is basically the energy extraction matrix we see on these outer lands times 5. Wow. There's a reason why these flat earth shills don't talk about the center. And it's a little foolish because these same people will describe how in ancient cosmology they knew the earth was flat. I'm sure many people who are listening to this have seen the ancient Mayan and Aztec and Hebrew conceptions of the world. Well, if you look at the center, there is always an axis or a sacred mountain or a tree. And this begs the question, what more do these myths say? And so on my channel, I have dove into every single one of these myths. And there's not much to really decode. I mean, in Pliny's Natural History, which was written in 1 AD, Pliny the Elder actually states that Hyperborea is beyond the North Pole. And this works completely in tandem with our crater continent idea, because to go beyond the North Pole, at first that seems ambiguously, well, it's some land east or west of the pole, but when you think of a crater, well, of course, they're going beyond a crater. They are entering downwards into a land. They're going beyond the North Pole. And even Admiral Byrd, who made his very famous, what we previously called Hollow Earth expedition to Agartha, he stated in his diary in 1947, "I dream of going back to the land beyond the North Pole." So there's all of these accounts describing going beyond the North Pole. It's a holy crater. And this brings up, which I've said multiple times, the etymology of Grail. Now, the Holy Grail, if anybody does a Google search, was depicted in medieval times as a holy chalice which existed at the center of a round, flat table, and surrounding are King Arthur's men. And there's many, many stories of the Holy Grail. It's considered the chalice of immortality, and it represents the hero's ultimate quest. So if we look at the word grail, grail comes from the Latin word Cratalis. Cratalis means crater. So it's not a holy grail, it's a holy crater. And interestingly, in many Mount Meru depictions, Mount Meru actually looks just like a grail.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And one thing about the, flat earth shills, I don't really go there because I don't know, I don't have proof on anything, but one thing for me, I just gotta say is, I've always been interested in this North Pole stuff, man, and I never really known and been well versed, but thanks to you, I am now. So you just got to keep doing your thing and hope people come around and start talking about it, because I sure am. That's probably going to be one of my next videos. After that, I want to say I pulled up a map when you started talking earlier about the Outer Lands. I pulled up the Buddhist map that's supposedly made centuries ago that has the land outside of the Antarctic Ring, just for people to look at. If you guys are interested, just do a search for 10,000-year-old Buddhist map. It'll pop right up, and you could research it on your own. This was in a newspaper in like the early 1900s. I'm gonna pull it off the screen now, but yeah, that's very interesting about the chalice in the middle of the flat table being a crater, and this lends credence or gives a little more insight of what the Hollow Earth could be. Do you have anything on Hollow Earth?
Well, what they've done with the Hollow Earth theory is tell us there's an opening at the North Pole and there's an opening at the South Pole. But all accounts only talk about the North Pole. And there are suspicions and stories of perhaps a Nazi settlement on the South Pole. And this makes you think, oh, well, if the Nazis, or in some stories it's the Illuminati, if these groups are allowed in the Hollow Earth, well, the Hollow Earth can't be a harmonious place. But just like they do this with the three North Poles, they're trying to confuse us. They're trying to muddy the waters with lies. They give us some truth. They give us some lies.
Absolutely. That is always the case. Since researching your work, I'm getting very interested in this, and I'm probably going to be all over it for a while. I'm going to order the book Paradise Found. Do you have that book? Have you read it?
I have read it, and it is a wonderful mythological review on all of these ancient cosmologies, and then some. The author is William Warren. He was the first president of Boston University. Now, my only qualm with the book is he is not a flat earther. He believes in the globe. He actually has a few chapters where he describes gravity and how this proves the North Pole is the Garden of Eden. So if anybody listening, or even if you, ODD, want to read it, just take it with a grain of salt, because there are parts where he does mock the ancient cosmology of the flat earth. But I use that book all the time in my research. It's great.
Sure. Another book that I am getting I'm getting ready to read, I have browsed through it before just a little bit, is Beyond the Poles. Now, have you looked at that? And if so, does it correlate with some of the stuff you're talking about as far as the North Pole?
I have yet to read that book. That is actually one of the next ones on my list.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to check that one out. So, yeah, man, this is definitely crazy. And a lot of the stuff you say, you keep saying that you can go to the North Pole, the Arctic region, if you have the proper intent and the right heart about it, if you have a good heart. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I must say, Flat Earth is not solely about the physical circumstances of our world. So it's wonderful and it's necessary that we have those who are willing to prove Flat Earth measure the lack of curvature, describe plane routes, and how we do live on a motionless plane. But what else? What else is there to know about this Earth, this flat realm we live on? Well, the center houses a sacred land. And does this mean anybody can enter? Well, no. In the Hyperborean, in the famous Hyperborean poem by Pindar, he says, "Never the muse is absent from their ways." Now, a muse is not always a person. It's the source of inspiration for a creative artist. So, well, we are all artists. We are all God in the flesh. So this poetic line is simply stating that those at the center are in tune with their multidimensional creative abilities. They are perfectly aligned with God and with Source. Now, it's a fractal that we're in. We have been fractalized into these bodies. And an easy way to think about this is the hermetic term, as above, so below, as within, so without. Our heart chakra is a beautiful emerald green color, and our heart chakra bridges the lower three chakras with the upper chakras. And for those who don't know, the lower three chakras are rooted in the material realm. So this has to do with power and sex and survival and feeling grounded. The heart is the bridge from the material to the spiritual. And so we must open up the green rays of our hearts in order to pass into this land, because we're going to the heart of the earth. And this is exactly why the aurora borealis is the same color as our heart chakras. This is the culmination of heart energy, which is pouring out from these beings who are not entirely physical. They are semi-ethereal beings who live at the center. Now, when we look at the myths of Shambhala, the inhabitants live in absolute peace and harmony, free of sickness or hunger. They all have wealth, but they have no need to use their wealth. There are no such things as physical punishment because there is nobody to be punished. It's said that the happiness and joy they experience can compete with that of the gods. So what I'm proposing, based on everything I'm reading, is not that this is a free-for-all land, but like the stories of the Flaming Sword and the Bifrost Bridge, all of these are protective mechanisms which surround this land. And it's even said in the myths of Shambhala, if one is not ready to enter, all one will find is icy storms and dry deserts. So there is absolutely a spiritual element to this. Based on all accounts of the inhabitants are vegans. In fact, they are breatharians in some stories, fruitarians in other stories. And it makes sense that in such a pure land, they cannot accept or experiment with having beings with malintent. Because the closer we are to the magnetic center, the quicker our thoughts materialize. The beings of Shambhala have extraordinary psychic powers. They are telepathic. They can feel from miles away what everyone else is feeling. And in this way, it is a supreme paradise because the beings are consistently aligned with the light of God, with the light of Source. Now, any imbalances within this field would result in getting kicked out. And this is exactly what I have proposed has happened in the stories of Adam and Eve. They eat from the tree of good and evil, of the knowledge of good and evil. And this means they experimented with duality. Now, duality is simply a Hegelian dialectic of an energy extraction system. So you have a dark side or you have a light side. And the beings in Shambhala do not go to either one. They are benevolent, but they do not tune any of their actions or thoughts according to duality. Now, in order to get back to the Garden of Eden, we can spit out the seeds of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. However, it takes intense determination, it takes meditational practices, it takes clearing up the auric field of any traumas. And again, do I know this 100%? No, but this is what I have come to the conclusion of, and take it as you will.
Yeah, well, and at least with what you're doing, trying to have an expedition to the North Pole, dude, at the very least, you could prove it wrong and we could shut up about it, you know what I mean? But if you do find something, that'd be absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm sure you will. What's funny is I watched a North Pole documentary one time for some research I was doing on flat Earth, and these guys were like, we're going to the North Pole, and they were on this little ice sheet and walking. Like, okay, they had their compass, 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet, North Pole, and it's just a blank area with just snow, and it was obvious propaganda. I mean, you could look it up on Wikipedia and they'll tell you there's no land there. There's just floating ice sheets. It's kind of funny.
Oh, it's hilarious. Any scientific depiction of the North Pole, it shows a massive area just covered in water or ice, like you said, or broken up ice as icebergs. So the question is, why can't our scientists make up their minds what's at the North Pole? I mean, if we supposedly have satellites, which are fake, but let's give them the benefit. If we have all of this aerial technology, why can't we decide what's at the pole? And simply put, they're hiding the Garden of Eden.
Indeed. So another thing that before we take questions from the chat, which we'll be doing here in a minute, one thing that you talk about that interests me a whole lot is the energy extraction matrix. And I just want you to elaborate on what that is to the audience.
Yes. So we are in an energetic enslavement system. And this is one that I call the energy extraction matrix. And I use this word to differentiate the matrix and this false matrix. So first, let me explain what the matrix is. We are all in the matrix. The matrix is this holographic realm we're in, Earth. It's what our minds interact with, and it's one of the many bubbles of God. What's been called Source or God or the Pleroma in the Gnostic tales, these names all refer to the origin point of creation. And what this means is beyond language. We cannot tie down God as having a gender or a shape or a form, because as soon as we do, we're masking its majesty with structure. So the only way to describe God would be to use the word source. It's the source of everything. I believe
sense.
It was Manly P. Hall who said, we are the gods of the atoms that make up ourselves, but we are also the atoms of the gods that make up the multiverse. And this is simply putting, like I said, we are fractalized versions of God, every single one of us. Source breaks itself up into fragments that we call oversouls. Those break into souls, and then we're now currently in this realm. We descend into this matrix called Earth. And it's real, but it's an illusion. The ancient Sanskrit word for matrix is Maya, which means illusion. So we are indeed in an interactive hologram dreamt up by the dreaming mind of God. So that, in a nutshell, is the Matrix. It's a playground for the mind of God. However, within this Matrix, there's been another Matrix set up, another illusory system. But this system is not based in creativity, life, empathy, natural union, regeneration. This other matrix, the energy extraction matrix, is based on oppression and fear and sadism. You know, toxic food, all avenues of media, government, education, banks, so on and so forth. It's a system which aims to inflict basically an AI infection within the human mind and spirit as to manipulate the etheric plane. So let's break this down even further. The etheric plane is one of the cosmic planes. It's the model for the material, for the physical universe. The ether is where our thoughts and intentions go for materialization. Those who call themselves the elite have set up the energy extraction matrix not solely because they love inflicting suffering and they adore power, but because the ultimate goal is to change how we create this reality. Because, again, we're God fractalized, and because of that, we are the ones running the show. As creators, we determine the direction of the collective consciousness, and because of that, we determine the direction of this realm. So those in power, and we can call them reptilians, clones, shapeshifters, it doesn't matter. The point is, these beings are so disconnected from Source, from God, that they have aligned solely with an AI parasitic consciousness. Now, this may seem confusing because if everything came from Source, then how do you have an infectious parasitic mindset? Wouldn't that mean that God is sort of having a nightmare, a bad dream? Well, no. Everything came from Source, but not everything is of Source. So it's a strange paradox. Those who have disconnected from the will of God, which is unity, compassion, empathy, these beings have therefore lost their abilities to create. You disconnect from God, you disconnect from the God within. You see how that works? So the energy extraction matrix aims to create conditions for these beings that best suit their intentions, which is energetic vampirism. They no longer feel that nourishing light of God, and they cannot feel Mother Earth's abundance. So they've reduced themselves to parasites who require our anger and addictions and sadness in order to keep themselves and the demonic forces they work with fed. So that is the energy extraction matrix. And like I said, the North Pole, the center, is absent of this parasitic consciousness, which is why we would consider it to be a paradise. But in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing special. They just don't rape and pillage and oppress their populations.
Sure. Yeah. One thing, of course, when we get to talking about stuff like this, it's like people get riled up and, beliefs clash. I just want to say that I respect your thoughts and I love the way you think. And, of course, to me, it's not proven or it's not a fact that these things are true, but I will entertain it and keep looking at these things unbiasedly. That's the difference between me and most people, is that I can handle all sorts of different information without being triggered or worried about it. And I could still look at it unbiasedly without worrying about and I don't necessarily agree with everything you say, and I don't necessarily agree with anybody else that I watch. But again, this show is about my guest, guys. So these are his thoughts. Agree, disagree, it doesn't matter. I think he's very clever, and his intuition and his insight is really good. So take it or leave it, no worries. Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah, I think that's, I have been looking at, I was making a video about something about the Matrix, and I was unaware that it went back so far. So I had recently started delving into the Maya, which is the Matrix. It's the ancient Matrix system that they've been talking about this for centuries, for thousands of years. So I guess the next segment is we're gonna move on to having questions from the audience. So if anybody out there has questions, hit me up, and I'll ask Devin, because I don't think he could see the chat. But
No, I cannot.
But yeah, I look at all sorts of stuff, man. Like, we had a little episode last week with Subtle Infinity. He got a little crazy with the religion stuff, and people get upset when you mention certain things. We all have different beliefs, and the fact is none of us know. It's a leap of faith to believe in a religion, or perhaps the Bible and Jesus Christ and all that, but it's also a leap of faith not to. It's 50-50. I look at it and I'm trying to get to the bottom of this reality just like everybody else, but along the way I don't get upset about anybody's beliefs. Let's see if we have any questions. Let's see. Joseph Zio, how do angels fit in the New Age movement? I don't know. I don't know. What about Atlantis? What are your thoughts on Atlantis? Does that have anything to do with the North, or is it just a hidden land in general, or is it a land that came and gone?
I do not believe it has relation to the North. I did at one point, but upon further research, I've deduced that we're in the remnants of Atlantis right now. Keep in mind that most depictions of Atlantis is a divine realm where things went wrong. Sometimes it's advanced technology which wiped people out. Often there is a flood or a deluge. And we are in Atlantis right now. We are in the metaphorical sunken continent because, in my opinion, we have deviated from the original consciousness of a human being. And it's interesting because there is a song by the Klaxons called Atlantis to Interzone. And essentially, it is a hidden message which is telling us that if we would like to be in paradise, then we will go from Atlantis, where we are now, to the interzone, which is the inner zone, which is the North Pole. The chorus states, from Atlantis to interzone, you start at the edge and you end on your own. You start at the edge and you end on the throne. Like I was saying earlier, North is an anagram for throne. And this is telling us you start at the edge, you end on the throne. Now, I've theorized in the past that we actually are on a consistent journey to the center. That when we unlock aspects of our divinity collectively, we then make a movement to the center. So perhaps we were hellish beings on the outer lands. We started at the edge, and you make your way to the throne. And from there, perhaps there is yet another inner land to go to. Again, this is speculation. So that's my opinion. We're in Atlantis right now.
Nice, man. I got a lot of questions flying through. I'm sorry, guys. I can't keep up with everything. But, of course, there's people, wondering why you were on board with the blood over intent. We decided we're not going to talk about that. Devin told me that he has distanced himself from the blood over intent stuff, so we're just going to leave that alone. The next question is, what is the aether? What is the ether or the aether to you?
The ether or the etheric plane is the model for the material. So this is the plane of creation. This is the astral web. This is in part why we can feel the collective consciousness if we choose to tap into it. We can feel when somebody across the room is upset, or all of a sudden we call our friend and, hey, are you okay? And they just got in a car crash. The ether is the web that connects all of us. And this is exactly why we are godlike. We are able to manifest. Without the ether, there is nowhere for our consciousness to materialize, and therefore we would, like the globists say, we would just be physical monkey men who have evolved.
Interesting. All these questions I have rolling in are going to be totally different, but I got one from Martin Leedkey. What's up, Martin? He says, is Devin aware of another 2 ships that say they are going to the North Pole, which is now ice-free, they say? I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about that. Have you?
No, is this the scientific community or?
It sounds like it. If you have nothing on that, that's okay. We'll keep cruising. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? I missed all sorts of stuff. I can't keep up, but I'll keep my eye out for more questions. What is Sheol? To me, Sheol is it's almost the same thing as in all cultures have shared these depictions of the North. Pretty much many cultures also share many depictions of the underworld or hell, and Sheol is on the Hebrew map. What's your take on the underworld and Sheol and all that?
Yes, so we are microcosms of the macrocosm, which simply means that the planes of existence are mirrors, or we are mirrors of the planes of existence. So we are now on the heart. Picture a chakra chart. The heart is in the center, and Earth is an anagram for heart. There is no coincidence. Now, the center land is unrelated to these subterranean lands. And actually, it's just coming to me when we were talking about Hollow Earth, that is used to confuse these lands because it states the subterranean caverns reach into the Hollow Earth. So there are hellish beings and hellish realms which correspond to the lower chakras, which physically we would say are below the earth. So there are many people who state that the reptilians, they come from the subterranean lands, which would make sense because they are a race who have not activated the green ray of their heart, and therefore they are a sort of invader species. So their time on the heart is coming to an end. Let's not really go there right now, but they come from the lower chakras. And those who would like to travel to higher realms have to make a physical journey or astral project. So it's, in my opinion, that we're on the heart. We are going to the heart of the heart because each chakra has its own chakras. And then from there, from the Garden of Eden, we have opportunities to ascend upwards into the realms that correspond with the higher chakras. So Sheol is, like you said, ODD, a Greek depiction and description of the underworld. Who knows which plane of existence it's talking about, but it's fair to say that because the elite have deep underground military bases, we've heard of the cloning centers from my good friend Og Tellez and Donald Marshall. It's safe to say that these are hellish domains, and this is what the elite are communicating with and possibly from.
Indeed. I got another question I don't really want you to answer. I just want to elaborate real quick. It says, who does Devin think are the shills and why? I want to say that stuff is something I'm never going to concern myself with again. I stand on my own. You know, I don't know Devin, and I respect his work. It doesn't mean we're connected. I treat everybody civilly, and I'm a friendly guy, man. I'm in here, and I'm just doing my own thing. I stand on my own at the end of the day, and so does Devin, and so should everybody else. Anybody worried about who thinks what about other people, you go watch TMZ, okay? We're not worried about that BS. If you want to ask Devin that question, go to his channel and leave a comment in one of his videos. Next question comes from Jimmy. What do you think of the Book of Enoch? Have you read it?
I have read sections of the Book of Enoch, but I'm not familiar enough with it to really comment.
Yeah, me too. I have looked at it, and it has a lot of the flat Earth keywords. It had firmament this, firmament that, suns traveling through portals and stuff. And I just don't know how to make sense out of it. But let's see if we have any more questions. Does Devin believe in Christ consciousness?
I do, however, I do not align with any New Age teachings. Like your last guest on the show, ODD, said, it is yet another prison. We can call it ideological warfare. It is indeed the new cage religion, but I do believe that the complex story and allegory of Jesus Christ is in part describing the methodology and conditions in order to achieve what you're calling Christ consciousness. And this isn't some out of reach state of being. It's simply aligning with the creator within you and choosing sovereignty. And when I say sovereignty, I mean not relying on external influences in order to guide this current journey you're on. And I will say, again, I don't mean to offend anybody, but in my opinion, God has been externalized from us on purpose, because as long as we view source or this creative force as a being who we must gain external approval from, we will never align with Christ consciousness.
Indeed. Yeah, don't worry about you just be yourself, share what you feel, and don't worry about it, man. We don't even have to agree with each other, but we can show people that we don't have to share all the same beliefs in order to treat each other with respect and be able to get along, man. So that's what I'm all about. When I first started this flat earth stuff, I was all about trying to be Mr. Cool and calling people shills and this, and I've learned from that. And since then, I've lost my ego. I've had my ego put in check big time, and I'm in a place of zen. I worry about nothing, and I just do what I feel compelled to do, which is spread the information that I'm passionate about, and that's what I see you doing, brother. So you're all good. Let's see what we got. Somebody said shout out Texas, ODD. So shout out to Texas, man. Much love. Hope everybody's safe down there after man-made Hurricane Harvey. Let's see what else we got. You know what? I do want to say something about, I'm not really big on the reptilians, but you made a video about it that was probably one of the biggest eye openers for me to get me to actually take it somewhat serious and look at it. Because I used to just be like, nah, don't even bring that up. Don't say reptilians. That's the worst thing you can do. But it could be a metaphor for, like David Icke says. Not that I think David Icke is pretty much a gatekeeper, but he does say things about reptilians. And other people have said it's the R brain. We have a reptilian brain in our own brain. It's called the R brain or something like that, right? And or the R membrane, where it basically if you function off of this part of your brain, then you're cold, you're heartless, you kind of you don't have any compassion for humanity, stuff like that. But what you showed in your video was like people morphing and kind of transforming, somewhat glitches on the screen. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit. I'm not sure how much you believe in reptilians or if it's just maybe a figure of speech for that R brain stuff. But to me, there's something to it. They have TV shows about reptilians all the time. And what I see from Hollywood and the programming aspect is they show us a lot of truth in plain sight. So what's up with the reptilians in your opinion?
Well, my short answer is it's a mystery. And I don't think anybody can say 100% what we're viewing when we see these glitches, these reptilian eyes. It's been getting very bad in the past few years, but I do have my speculations. Now, there are 3 ways that has been proposed how reptilians are able to blend into society relatively unnoticed. So they can transfer their projected consciousness from body to body via underground cloning centers. And in these centers, there are operations in place which make sure reptilian entities have an endless supply of human avatars with the right genetics to inhabit. Now, if you're familiar with Donald Marshall, it's said that some reptilians drone the bodies of already established figures in society, and they take advantage of these humans' societal status by replacing them via a process called droning, where there is a proboscis. It's a type of worm creature which grotesquely shoots out of the reptilian's eye, makes its way into the victims, and essentially body snatches the being. And this could be where the concept and movie of Body Snatchers comes from. So those are 2 ways. Now, the main way they blend in, which is where I lean towards, is by using advanced holographic technology to cloak themselves. So there's these things called liquid crystals.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, they are matter in a state which has properties between those of conventional liquids and those of solid crystals. You can do a Google search. For years, scientists have been studying liquid crystals for use in holographic technologies. These studies claim that the technology is basic and undeveloped, but as we should know by now, what is released to the public is only a fraction of the true technology in operation behind the scenes. So essentially, I was reading up on these liquid crystals, and here's how they work. You have these liquid crystals which, once they're applied to something, they don't drip, for lack of a better term. They are liquid, but they are also slightly solid. So you can paint liquid crystals onto a canvas, onto an object, onto your body, and after that, an electrical field can be applied to this liquid crystal mixture, altering how this medium bends or refracts the direction of incoming light. So you can send laser beams with holographic images through the crystal mixture and can generate what appears to be just an everyday image, indistinguishable from a person or an object. But as with all technology, as with anything electrical, anything that has to do with frequencies, especially being carried over television, where there's many layers that the pixels and frequencies have to move through, there are glitches. And this is exactly why in recent years there has been a big push to move towards higher and higher definition television, because for some reason this holographic technology is breaking down. And so more and more we're seeing reptilian claws or eyes or strange anomalies, period, with these beings. So that is my theory, and it could be something like from the movie They Live, where there is a main broadcasting center which is working in tandem with these liquid crystals in order to broadcast what we would see as Donald Trump.
Sure. You know, I love your videos, and that's the thing. These a lot of people here listening going, this guy's off his rocker, but you guys got to go. Please give this guy a chance. Sub to his channel if you're not subbed, and check out his work, and just try to do it without, you know, that my whole thing is none of us know absolutely anything, you know, when it, like in an absolute way. So we need to be looking at everything. If you close yourself on a belief system, what that does is it blocks you from being able to find out other things. When you take in a belief system, you have to, you know, defend it whenever it's challenged. So I try not to take hold on any belief system. I try to keep my mind open to a certain extent and always look at everything, because I'm always learning new things. And at the end of the day, I always know that I don't know everything. But again, watch Devin Madgy's videos. His channel is called Flat Earth Paradise. Link is in the description. When you watch his videos, it's 100 times better than listening to him describe it on this show. The thing is, there's a lot of people tuned in right now that are subbed to Devin, and they know his work, so they know what he's talking about. And it's really great stuff. He brings a lot to the table that no other truth seeker does. So I think it's really good. He's an asset to not only the flat earth community or the any other community, but just the truth community as a whole, the truth collective, I like to call it. Let's see what else we got, if we have any more questions. Let's see. Oh, I know what. Body snatchers. You were saying something about body snatchers. I recently got into the line of research of looking at parasites in the body, which is definitely documented and 100% true that parasites they go into your body, and from what I gather, they can basically interweave themselves with you in a way to where they think for you, and basically they crave sugars, animal proteins, weird stuff like that. So you'll be craving a certain thing, maybe a sugary snack or, you know, a large hunk of meat or something, and sometimes it you know, I'm not sure, but it could be possibly these parasites that are asking for it, making you think that's what you want when it's not actually you thinking that. It's these parasites. And alcohol breaks down into sugar, and basically they crave, you know, they get you to do all sorts of stuff that you don't know about. And this is all a theory of mine, not the parasites, because that's a fact. We have parasites in our body from all sorts of things, but the fact that they can actually, you know, drain your energy and think for you to where you'll go ingest something into your body that they were asking for. Have you looked into that? And what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, anyone passing a parasite knows that it reconfigures your body and your mind. many people who go on a 10, 20, even a 40-day water or juice fast will indeed see these grotesque looking larvae and worms in their stool. And upon passing it, they have this strange sense of relief. Like you said, their cravings for meat and processed sugar and alcohol diminishes because everything we eat affects the gut flora, which is actually responsible for what we are salivating at. So the poisoning of the flesh via food is the cornerstone to the energy extraction matrix. You can go into any city, and what do you see? Bars, barbecues, eateries, restaurants, casinos. These are all outlets which promote and normalize the poisoning of the flesh. So we say the body is a temple. And this is indeed true. This is why the powers that be aim to pollute the body as much as possible. Because when we're experiencing dis-ease of any kind, we're not fulfilling our divine purpose. We're going against creation. And like you said, we are terraforming our bodies by attracting these parasites, which do influence how we think, what we crave. And it's of my opinion that if we want to remain tethered to our divine purpose, and yes, I say tethered, not grounded, tethered to this 3D reality, then we drink alcohol, eat meat, processed foods. But if we want to ascend upwards, we must eat from the sun. So humans are naturally sun eaters. However, most of us have lost this capability. The sun above our heads pours down life force, prana, onto everything in existence. Without the sun, we would not be here. So to eat closest to the source, to God, is to eat the fruits and vegetables, what Mother Nature grows from the sun. So the primary source would be sunlight. The secondary source of nutrition would be fruits and then vegetables. But there is a tertiary source, which is the body parts and fluids of dead sentient creatures, of animals. Now, the reason there is energy in these foods, in meat, in milk, and cheese, is because the animal it came from ultimately ate from the ground, which was nurtured by the sun. So if we would like to combine our eating habits with that of compassion, of the path of non-destruction and health, well, we will all be vegetarians. And in fact, the only foods which attract parasites, which are not only body parasites, but are mind parasites, are meat, are pork, shellfish. Once we cut out processed foods, yes, even processed plant foods, and the flesh and fluids of sentient beings, parasites cannot thrive in our bodies.
Good one, man. Somebody recommended, I wrote it down. Someone said, actually my buddy Racer Apps, he's in the chat, Ustus uncanus, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Ustus uncanus tea is a good way to flush out parasites, he says. And he also has the next question for you. He says, how did you get into FE, Flat Earth?
I got into Flat Earth almost exactly like most people I've talked to, and I credit it to Mr. Eric Dubé. Back in 2009, I came across his
Atlanta.
200 proofs.
Oh wait,
right. His blog, Atlantean something. It
conspiracy.
Yeah, it had back then 200 proofs the Earth is flat, and made a lot of sense to me. And I think, like all of us, we start with 9/11, with Zeitgeist. I remember being 14 years old and watching Zeitgeist over and over and over again. It was mind blowing to me that there was anything wrong with the world. I mean, we all hear money is the root of all evil and stuff like that, but I think for a lot of us, 9/11 was that first domino, and sooner or later, we're researching Hollow Earth and Nazi connections and what is the Illuminati, and basically you just get used to looking for truth in every area, and Flat Earth was the cherry on top, which connected everything for me.
Good
So
call.
thank you, Eric Dubé. Even though I do not agree with everything he says, I appreciate and still do appreciate his efforts.
I appreciate him as well for waking me up to the flat Earth. It's funny though. I'm a shill to him. He basically woke me up, and now it's the most interesting thing when someone would wake you up and then start calling you a shill. But that's okay in my book. I still respect his work, and I don't agree with everything he says either. That's okay, man. I don't know, all about what if he's a shill or not, man. But that's interesting. I didn't know he did 200 proofs the Earth was not a spinning ball that long ago. But if so, kudos to Eric, man. That's really cool. What else do we got? I think I had something. I kind of forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, yeah, I was gonna bring up the money being the root of all evil thing. Now, a lot of Christians get mad at me because I do believe the Bible contains a lot of truth, but I also believe that it contains other things that are not truthful, and in fact, maybe completely wrong. But again, I don't know, so don't get mad at me, guys. The thing about money is in the Bible. It says, man cannot worship two gods. Mammon is money, right? And it says man should not worship mammon, something like that. I don't know the exact phrasing, but here we are today with our paper money that says "In God We Trust" right on it. So we basically do just like the Bible says, like we shouldn't do. We're worshiping money as a god, in my opinion. It's very interesting. So let me run through and the thing about Zeitgeist. I used to be totally into that too. I was like, this is the truth. I used to run around posting all sorts of stuff on my Facebook page back in like 2012 about how I know for a fact this and that, and Jesus was the son, and the fact is I've learned since then I don't know any of that for sure, and in fact I don't even think so anymore. But I do think that Zeitgeist has 100% been debunked by the Christians who made videos about it, in a sense that Jesus really isn't comparable to Horus and Mithra and all these other gods that they compare him to, because in the movie Zeitgeist they make all sorts of outlandish claims that you can go and try to verify for yourself, and you can't verify it. Like they'll say, Horus was this list of things, and they'll say Jesus was also this list of things. Mithra was also Mithras or something was also this list of things. But if you go try to fact check all these things, you can't verify that all those gods are comparable. I saw I don't know, man. It makes a lot of sense, at first glance, but I've since come to the terms that Zeitgeist is definitely not true like they want it to be. Some of the things they say, the end result could be what they're saying, but since they added all this false stuff, it's just I can't take it seriously anymore. We're gonna get out of here soon. Let's. Anybody got any more questions for Devin before we leave? Hit me up in the chat. And how can the audience support your efforts or know about your future updates about the North Seal project that you're working on?
There's a few ways. We have a website. It's still under construction, but It's northsealproject.org. And on the homepage, there is a bar where you can add your email, and you will be added to our very secure email list. And we do monthly updates, and we will be basically sharing step by step what we're doing, how we are allocating the money we've made from the crowdfunder. But even if you don't want to do that, we will be posting starting late October regular updates, and we will be demonstrating the equipment we're bringing along, how we are researching. We are going to post our research when it comes to possible routes and maps. We are learning how to use a very complex ancient instrument called an astrolabe, which involves calculus. So we will be perhaps giving tutorials on all of these things. And we just set up a Flat Earth Paradise t-shirt shop, and it does have t-shirts about the North, but also just general Flat Earth merch, and every cent is going towards the project.
Excellent, man. I want to support the best I can. I think I missed it. I was looking at the chat. Are you still accepting donations for this project, or are you going to update us on that later?
Yes, we are accepting private donations via PayPal at the moment. So if anybody is interested in contacting us before you make a donation, or simply making an anonymous one, you can PayPal it via northsealproject@gmail.com. And in advance, I want to thank anybody who does, or who's even considering it.
Excellent. I'm going to donate. And I want to say, a lot of people that ask for donations, I'm not usually into that stuff. But Devin has laid out a really great plan in a previous video. It's the campaign for the North Seal project. And he laid out everything that he was going to do. But apparently some of the plans have changed, so that video is no longer completely valid. So maybe you can...
Yes, and
yeah, go ahead.
I don't want it to appear as anything but growth. We are growing and we are learning every day. So our original plan had to be modified. And I'm the first one to say those plans are no longer valid, but I have changed some things, and I just hope that people are inspired by what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. And like I said, we will be reviewing every ounce of the money we receive. We will be publicly sharing where it is being allocated to, along with what equipment it is buying. If at any time plans change, or we end up with a surplus of monies, we will return it back to its respective donors.
Excellent, man. I think that's noble. You're doing a great job and being transparent with all this. Let's do one last question before we get out of here, and then we'll have final thoughts, and then we'll close it down. But Zvindabs asks, what are your thoughts on the Mandela effect?
Well, there's a few possibilities. From what I understand, in 2006, specifically the date 6606, this is the date in which there was a large ceremony at CERN, which, as we know, is the giant European particle collider, which is said to be searching for the God particle. Now, the goal of CERN and many other unnamed supercomputers and particle accelerators around the world, the goal of these technologies is to be able to tap into the fabric of time and space as to create timelines which most benefit the elite. So if anybody has seen the movie Tomorrowland, spoiler alert, Tomorrowland is about a future dystopia in which there is a machine which is projecting thoughts into the past as to create destructive realities for humans. And so basically, this machine, this ball of energy, is broadcasting apocalyptic scenarios, doomsday scenarios to past civilizations of Earth as to create more favorable conditions for what we would call the elite. Now, this is not that far from the truth. We live in a multi-dimensional realm. So the past, present, and future are simultaneously existing. And the collective consciousness can change the past the same way we can swap ideas and information through the ether. We can penetrate the barriers of time and space, because after all, both are illusory. So the Mandela effect was and still is experiments being done by the elite to see how effective their technology is. Their ultimate goal, which they will fail at it, they already have as far as I'm concerned, their goal is to induce small changes, insert it into the past, change movies, change titles of businesses. We've all heard the famous line from Star Wars, Luke, I'm your father. That changed all of a sudden into, no, I'm your father. And this is testing out this equipment.
Interesting. Yeah, I have my own thoughts on it and stuff. Who's to say that someone's wrong for believing in a certain one, because it seems that it affects people differently, so I'm not sure, but I do believe in some of them. So therefore, I do believe in the Mandela effect. With all that said, we're going to get out of here, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to sub to Devin Madgy. The link is below. His channel is called Flat Earth Paradise. And if there's things that he said that maybe offended you, still give him a chance. He has some really great material. I have his link for the NorthSealProject.org also in the description, and the maps that were going through the screen throughout the video of the North Pole. These are official maps that used to have the North Pole on them. It's no longer there. They wiped it out in the late 1600s, early 1700s. But there's a zip file with all those maps, and I got the highest quality ones that I could for you guys. And in fact, yesterday I went and paid $50 to print out a 2x2 of the Mercator North Pole projection, and $50 at FedEx to get it printed and laminated. And this map is in the zip file. It's a really, really large map. I actually downsized it to 2x2 to get it printed. So you can get it printed even bigger if you want. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah, I'm going to be supporting Devin Madgy and his endeavors. I think he's a great guy. And I look forward to more of your work, brother. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate your support.
And we are out. Peace out, guys. Every single continent, every single culture had the same idea about what the North Pole is in their own way, even though they had no communications with each other. Now, what I was going to say to the audience, I have on screen, I have all sorts of maps running in a slideshow with North Pole as it was in mostly the 1500s and 1600s. Now, let me ask you, Devin, what do you notice about when the North Pole disappeared from maps?
Right. So these maps come from the 1400s to the early 1600s. There's a few from the mid 1600s, but after this time is when all of a sudden maps had blank spots at the North Pole. And essentially this what is usually a 4-continent system with a large rock at the center, this area was practically deleted from all maps. And there's even evidence that parts of Canada and Greenland were also removed, which sort of suggests an old world type of Photoshop. Now, this time period, the mid 1600s, is when the globe model started to be pushed in the West. And this is when we had the Copernican theory really make its way to the science books and in academia. So who knows? We can only speculate, but it's very interesting that the Garden of Eden vanished at the same time period that the globe model was being pushed.
Yeah, I agree. And for the audience, again, all these maps that are going across the screen, there is a link in the description for a zip file for you guys to download them and study them for yourselves. What's interesting is that most of the maps are from different cartographers, different map makers. There's a couple from Mercator, but there's also ones from different guys. So I find it very interesting. And Devin's absolutely right. Out of nowhere, the North Pole, as it was, disappeared, and you can see even the surrounding lands, like the northern Canada and stuff like that. You see that it's kind of faded away, like they accidentally erased a little bit of that as well when they were getting rid of these sacred lands at the North Pole. So let me ask you about your you have a, what do we call it, a group called the North Seal Project. What is that all about? What are you working towards with that?
Yes. So the North Seal Project is the name for the mission that myself and 3 others are embarking on next July of 2018. We've been researching the center for the past year. I've been publishing my presentations, and it got to the point where everything seemed meaningless unless I actually took action. I was adhering to the feminine principles of creativity.
I just want to run this by you. It's chapter 13. I'm just going to read this, and I'm going to put it on screen for the viewers, and then after I'm done reading it, it's not too much. We'll talk about it. It says, Chapter 13, The Earth's True Position in the Universe, Comparatively Recent Information, Present Chemical Condition, and Approaching Destruction by Fire. It has been demonstrated that the Earth is a plane, the surface center of which is immediately underneath the star called Polaris, and the extremities of which are bound by a vast region of ice and water and irregular masses of land which bear evidence of plutonic or fiery action and origin. In the geological structure of extreme northern regions, the sedimentary strata are abundant and of vast extent, while the constitution of Antarctic strata seems on the contrary, as far as yet examined, entirely igneous. Anyway, let me keep going. It gets a little crazy here. Basically, what I'm about to read is an account of the author Samuel Rowbotham referring to another book about a guy's expedition to the North Pole. And what was written in that book says, "The waves rise like mountains in height. Ships are heaved up to the clouds and apparently precipitated by circling whirlpools to the bed of the ocean. The winds are piercing cold and so boisterous that the pilot's voice can seldom be heard, whilst a dismal and almost continual darkness adds greatly to the danger. The sea quickly rising to a fearful height, breaking over the loftiest bergs. Our ships were involved in an ocean of rolling fragments of ice, hard as floating rocks of granite, which were dashed against them by the waves with so much violence that their masts quivered as if they would fall at every successive blow. The rudders were destroyed and nearly torn away from the stern posts. Hours passed after hours without the least mitigation of the awful circumstances in which we were placed. The loud crashing noise of the straining and working of the timbers and decks as she was driven against some of the heavier pieces was sufficient to fill the stoutest heart with dismay. It continues on, and I got this whole thing on screen right now for people to check out. But this is the third edition of Earth Not a Globe, Zetetic Astronomy by Samuel L. Robotham, a.k.a. Parallax. And it just continues on with how this is just the most dangerous expedition that this guy's ever been on. And I wanted to ask you if you think this is possibly true. And if it is, God bless you. I hope you're okay and safe when you try to do this. But also, could it be that they're trying to keep us away from going there by telling us that it's such a dangerous place?
Yes, well, it's interesting because there's many accounts which parallel the one you just described, that it's a perilous journey. There's even Greek accounts of sea monsters just infesting the Arctic waters. And obviously, you read these and a journey to the north, under communication, but not the masculine principle of action, of execution. So we decided to form a team 2 months ago, and ever since, our daily focus has been to effectively orchestrate an initial trip to the North Pole. So the goal of the North Seal project is to document our preparations and therefore inspire others to take this same journey. There's a lot of people who are feeling drawn to the center just like us. And it's this strange metaphysical pull. We feel it deep within our hearts. It's a sense of duty and mission that is indescribable. But like anything, nobody wants to be the first one to take such a drastic and possibly dangerous journey. Somebody has to stand up and say, enough talk. We know what might be at the North Pole, so I'm taking this journey, and I will show that it's possible with the correct intent and planning.
Sure.
So beginning next month, we will be coming out with vlogs and regular updates detailing our preparations, our spiritual and physical practices, and the main goal is to show that this can be done. We are currently stationed on the west coast of Wales in the UK. It's very possible that we will be in Greenland by the time we depart. So our plans have changed. We came out with a crowdfunder video 2 months ago. Our goal was $100,000 in order to rent an Arctic charter plane with live streaming capabilities. We ended up making 5% of that number. But this has actually proved to be a blessing. Our main concern with the plane from day one was, well, what's going to happen to the fuel and with the emissions from the plane? Because if this is truly a sacred, pure land, we want to respect this place. We want to respect its inhabitants as much as possible. So any potential pollution coming from aircraft didn't sit well with us. So now that we don't even have the means for an aircraft, our plans have changed, but for the better. We are now in the process of purchasing a mid-sized sailboat in order to go in the same way that Olaf Jansen in The Smoky God went. So I don't want to give too much away because our first updates will be next month at the end of October, and that's when everyone will finally meet the team. And from there, week by week, we will be going step by step, detailing what we're purchasing and everything in between.
Awesome. This brings me to something that I find interesting. I read the book Zetetic Astronomy. Have you ever read Zetetic Astronomy or browsed through it a little bit?
I've browsed through it, yes.
Okay, in chapter 13...
North Pole seems quite disastrous. We have multiple accounts, maybe less, but nonetheless. Olaf Jansen, we have one of a ship from the early 1900s called the Mount Wollaston. And we also have Admiral Byrd, who is not in a ship, but in a plane. Now, Olaf and the Mount Walston's stories are very smooth sailing. So, indeed, perhaps that is just put in the public sphere to scare anybody who wants to undertake this, to scare them off. But honestly, there has not been a modern expedition done in the past 120 years by boat. So I have no expectations. Me and the entire SEAL project are willing to risk our lives. This is how passionate we are about the North. And it's interesting because North is an anagram for throne. So according to us, we are going to the throne of the world, to the Axis Mundi. Now, you mentioned the North Star Polaris. So the axis, if you look up the definition, it's an area in which everything revolves around. So whether it's an axis in a mechanical sense, or in this case, in an earthly sense. So the North Star is stagnant. It remains in place year after year in the same spot. And the constellations revolve around it. Now, this is because at the North Pole is what mythology terms as the Axis Mundi. Now, the Axis Mundi is the sort of duct tape that bridges Earth and heaven. And literally every culture in the world has one of them. It's either a sacred mountain, a sacred pillar, or a tree of life that stands at the center of cosmology. Now, if we buy that the Earth is a globe, well, this just sounds ridiculous, and it's very easy to reduce these as completely made up. But when we take into account our own flat realm and where the toroidal field comes from, where all magnetism comes from, which is the center, then it makes sense. The center is the origin point. It's where the material rises to meet with the celestial. So it's very paradoxical, but the North Pole is on Earth, and it is also existing at a different frequency, and therefore in a higher realm. So the Axis Mundi, we have, like you said at the beginning, Mount Olympus for the Greeks. The Japanese call it Mount Shumasen. The Muslims call it Mount High Hera. The Norsemen have Yggdrasil. The Germans have Irminsul. I mean, there's hundreds of world axes all around the world.
Here we go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is ODD. Welcome to the second ODDcast. Today I have Devin Madgy with me of Flat Earth Paradise. And if you guys are tuning in, I want you to let me know if my audio's okay. I've been working on fixing my audio. I hope I don't sound like Isaac Hayes or Barry White like I did last time. But let me know in the chat if my voice is okay, please, and we will continue on. But anyway, we got Devin Madgy. He's pretty much, in my eyes, an expert on the ancient mythos of what's going on in the North Pole, as far as Shambhala, Eden, Hyperborea, Agartha, and sometimes even Mount Olympus. He does a lot of great work, and I really respect his work. I love it, so much so that I'm very excited to have him on the show today. So what's up, brother? How you doing? Introduce yourself and let us know what your channel's all about, what your mission is all about.
Well, thank you, ODD. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Devin Madgy, and like you said, I run the Flat Earth Paradise channel. And the name itself, Flat Earth Paradise, it describes exactly what my message is. I strongly suggest, with my research, that there is not only hidden land at the North Pole, what we know as the center of our flat plane, but that this land has been described over and over again in stories, ancient maps. Practically all ancient cosmologies speak of this land. So the center is essentially a paradise. It's the same one known to the Asians as Shambhala, to the Greeks as Hyperborea, to the Hindus as Paradisha or Area Varsha. The Japanese know it as Island of the Congealed Drop, and to the Christians, we know it as the Garden of Eden. So the North Pole is the origin of magnetism, and it's what William Warren in Paradise Found has called the cradle of humanity. Now, this land is home to an assembly of semi-physical, semi-ethereal beings, and they are what we would consider pure of heart. So those in Eden and those who are able to go there possess an affinity for enlightenment. And this is what all of the stories suggest. And yeah, it sounds like a fairy tale land, but that is what I'm suggesting. That this is a sacred land and that this is the greatest secret ever kept. And it's been staring us in the face the entire time. The North Pole is home to the Garden of Eden.
Absolutely. I think so as well. And when I say mythos, I don't say it in a way that it's fake in any way, but it's almost like syncretism where every